It's a new year. Time to drive my Ford Falcon. 182 kilowatt for an all-Australian 4-litre power. Only milk and juice comes in 2 litres. There's no replacement for Aussie displacement. 4-speed automatic that's smoother than my 16-year-old ride. Radio so I can listen to network. Rear-wheel drive Aussie skids, mate. The life of a Ford Falcon owner is a rather simple one. The mere concept of a high specific output engine, a redline over 5,500 RPM, and features like, doors are a totally foreign concept. The Ford Falcon is a phenomenally poorly built, unfathomably slow, and woefully inefficient car. Brand new, this was $38,000 less than an up-spec Accord Euro for a 4-litre straight-six full-size luxury car. And boy, can you see why. Hop into an Accord and the steering wheel buttons don't feel like a Christmas cracker toy. The gauges are backlit, not just a piece of plastic with numbers written on them in crayon. And if the Accord's engine was bored out to the same size as the Falcon's 4-litre straight-six, it would make another 100 horsepower. The Barra is one of the lowest specific output engines in modern circulation. Therefore, it's not surprising that the previous owner of this Falcon wanted to swap it for the Accord Euro that I restored recently on the channel, seeking something more refined and more fuel efficient. We met up at a random car park in true cheap car purchasing fashion, and with that, I was now the proud owner of a delightful blue Falcon XR6. I'm feeling like a Bogan already. Predictably, given this is a 21-year-old car with 238,000 kilometers, it needs some work. The obvious things on the outside is that the wheels are all very curbed and just about every panel has some form of paint fade on it. The right-hand indicator has a blown bulb, and the brakes are quite screechy, and one of them kind of makes a cooing noise from the back corner, so I wonder if maybe one of the pads has worn out. The wheel alignment is always trying to steer the car towards Perth, Australia, and at 100 k's an hour there's just a very slight drivetrain vibration, especially from the back, which I think is just a few wheels that are out of balance. While certainly not a great car, it's definitely a little bit better than I expected, and once all tidied up, it'll make for a pretty fun car for someone. The WAF, registration and service were all up to date. So to get the mighty XR6 restored back to its former glory, I began by taking it down to my mechanic Jack, who gave it a wheel alignment and rebalanced all of the wheels to hopefully sort out the drivetrain vibration. And in theory, that was all of the mechanical work that it needed. However, the more I drove it, the more I realised there seemed to be something very wrong with it. Firstly, it ran out of fuel while still showing a third of a tank, and it didn't just immediately stop like most cars when they run out of fuel. It slowly lost power and sputtered away for the best part of 10 minutes before finally carking it. It's gonna die, and there it goes. Secondly, it used an entire tank, well, the entire tank it could use, so about 2/3 of a tank, in just 200 kilometers. That's a fuel economy of 30 litres per 100k, twice as bad as my V8 Lexus ISF. I'd noticed quite a bit of black smoke coming out of the exhaust, especially when it was cold, and after scanning it, it confirmed that it was running extremely rich. And thirdly, while it drove okay for the most part, I noticed that under very light load, after sort of 5 or 6 seconds of 10% throttle, it would start to absolutely dump fuel in. You'd feel the engine start to lug and misfire, black smoke would pour out the exhaust, and the instant fuel economy would spike to like 70 litres per 100k. And finally, it refused to rev over 5,000 RPM, almost like the exhaust was blocked or something. Down into first. Yeah, I'm foot to the floor there, and it's not revving anymore. Now it's, whoa, see what the hang is going on there. So we began diagnosing.
we started by replacing the O2 sensor, which made no difference. Then we installed a set of new injectors. While easy to see, installing them is a bit of a pain because you have to take half the intake manifold off to get the fuel rail out of the way. But with the new injectors installed, it fixed the consistently awful fuel economy, but didn't fix the dumping fuel under light load or the refusal to rev over 5,000 RPM. Here we go. Right, let's see what happens. Foot to the floor. Foot hard down. Yeah, it gets stuck at 5 grand. We read online that these tend to wear out throttle position sensors, right on the bit that you use most often, around 10 to 20% throttle. As a result, around this area they sometimes read infinite resistance, telling the ECU you're at full throttle despite only being under light load. This seemed to make sense as it ran fine at full throttle, but sputtered and blasted black smoke out the back with horrendous instant fuel economy under light load. But we replaced the sensor twice to no avail. Apart from the injectors, nothing seemed to fix anything or even change the symptoms. Suspecting a blocked exhaust or even water in the fuel tank, we removed the fuel pump and siphoned out all of the liquid in the tank. But after filling 4 buckets with fuel, we confirmed it was definitely all petrol in there. So, for good measure, we replaced the fuel pump and pressure regulator. And finally, oh dear. After putting the fuel lines on properly,
You can tell I put the fuel lines on, eh?
somehow it was mended.
That sounds happier now. Oh yeah, it feels strong. The new pump is doing many things under there. The real test though is the cold start, because it always ran at its worst when it was cold before we made all these changes. So if it runs fine now, then we've pretty much confirmed that it's fixed. Sounds good.
So with all of the mechanical issues finally fixed, it was time to start on the cosmetics. I began by giving it an almighty good wash, clearing out all of the dirt from the wheel arches, door jambs and rubber seals. With the car clean and dried off, I clay barred the entire car to get the paintwork nice and smooth, ready for polishing before popping down to the local body shop supply store for some touch-up paint. After going around the entire car, touching up all the little bits of chipped paint, it was starting to look a lot better, so I began polishing. With the E34 530i I restored last year, I managed to get quite a lot of the faded paint buffed off, but with the Falcon, nothing I tried showed any improvement. So I gave up, applied some tyre shine, and moved inside. The interior, fortunately, was relatively easy to clean. Predictably, I found some vape paraphernalia in the centre console, but after thoroughly vacuuming all the carpets and seats and wiping down the plastics, after months of chipping away, the Falcon was ready for a new home.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Falcon is complete. Are you ready to experience the most power you've ever felt in your entire life? Wow! Feel the sheer torque of the Ford Australia Barra engine. The strength of this motor, it simply knows not a single bound. You know, I've got to admit, I've been pleasantly surprised. For a 4 litre, it is woefully underpowered. 182 kilowatt. BMW could nearly make that from a 2.5. This has got a 4 litre engine. So I don't know what all 6 cylinders with a nearly 10 centimetre bore are doing up there. But alas, the rest of the car, not gonna lie, it's pretty decent. The interior is not amazing, but for a car that came out in 2002, it's all right. The seats are quite cool with the tire track pattern on them. The steering wheel is ugly, but the material on it feels fine. It's reasonably well equipped. Yeah, it's got auto lights, got traction control, got cruise control, and it handles quite well, to be honest. The suspension setup is pretty good. And of course, you know, rear wheel drive, so it just does exactly what you expect. But the big issue with it really is the gearbox. I am in first gear right now, and honestly it feels like most cars second. It takes forever to get through the gear ratios. Nothing wrong with the way it shifts, it's just the length of the gears are astronomically long. First gear going 50 k's an hour. We're not even at 4,000 RPM. You could literally drive this entire back road in first gear. It's actually quite comedic how long the ratios are. So there we are, the Falcon. It's cheaply built, not especially reliable as I've discovered anyway, and woefully inefficient. But because it has a factory LSD and is one of the cheapest ways to get yourself a pretty powerful rear-wheel drive sedan, honestly, I can't complain. For like $4,000, if you're prepared to spend a decent amount of money on fuel, it's very comfortable, very nice to drive when just pootling around. It's reasonably fast, I guess, handles reasonably well. It's got a decent amount of features. For the money, it's not a half bad car. And so with that, I will say thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at Australia's finest from the early 2000s, and I will very much look forward to seeing you again next time.